Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Today, we are here on the Digital 2.0 Innovation Podcast Series. And today, I've got Sam Chlebowski joining me from Motion.io. Sam, thanks for taking time to talk to us today. Just to start us off, give us a little bit of background. Who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing right now?
Awesome. And thanks for having me, Jeremy. Very excited to be chatting with you today about, digital transformation and a little bit of my background, kind of what we're doing at Motion.io. So my background, I am at present moment, one of three co-founders at Motion.io. And what we do at Motion.io is we are building a client collaboration software for creative professionals and design businesses. The journey that sort of led up to starting Motion.io and deciding to jump into this business full time, when I had graduated school, I am a younger co-founder, 30 years old. When I had graduated school, I went to go work for a company as a WordPress developer. At that company, it was super small at the time that I joined. I was employee number 3, and the founder and one of my co-founders now, Perry Rosenblum, what he was doing initially was building websites for mental health professionals. What Perry had basically found in the marketplace is there was no solution for mental health practices, psychiatrists, therapists, counselors to get a website built in a affordable way that also would include things like ongoing support. So he had found this kind of perfect niche within the market, and it just took off. Over the course of 5 years, we grew from a team of 3 to a team of about 35 at the time that we were acquired. And it evolved into a full suite of marketing solutions specifically for the mental health industry. And I had, as time went on, evolved from, being a WordPress developer, the person building the sites, to eventually leading our sales, marketing, and customer success team. So it was one of those classic startup scenarios where you come in to do one thing, as time goes on, you're wearing 20 different hats. You're doing all of these things within the business. And what we basically learned at that time with Brighter Vision was there were no really great tools for creative and design project management that could also be used in a client-facing way. So to do things like asking clients for their brand assets, asking clients for their design preferences, asking them what they wanted their website or their logo to say about their brand. And we were doing a lot of these things through processes and through tools that we kind of had to hack together. So we might use Asana for one thing, Trello for another, a custom form for something else, use Zapier to tie the whole thing together. And the issue with that is we got to a place where it was really advanced, and we ended up developing in-house our own sort of design intake system that worked really well. But the fact is we had to make that in-house, and the other tools that we were using, because they were combining so many different elements, they would often break and pieces would go missing. We would have to check to turn something back on. And what we wanted to do with Motion.io is say, hey, we have this problem at Brighter Vision. And then our other co-founder, Zach, had a very similar problem at his previous business. We all have this problem. Let's see if we can validate this problem and if building a tool would be right for these types of businesses. And that's exactly what we're doing at Motion.io. So kind of a roundabout way to talk about my background and the journey of what led me here. There was also a consulting gig and another startup that I worked for in between, but that's where we are now.
You ran into some of the, typical challenges when we're looking at bringing a new product to market, though. Taking a whole bunch of separate tools to hack together a process, and then realizing that if we keep on doing this hack together and adding on another product, we're missing where our core traditional services really are. So it sounds like you're trying to solve that problem with Motion.io, is fill the gap. Instead of having multiple products to manage a product vision and bringing that out, really have one product that can centralize it all and centralize that process.
You basically nailed exactly what we are trying to do, because what we're learning, even as we get farther into speaking with more potential users, as we start to grow things like our launch list, we're learning that these initial hypotheses that we had are being proven more and more accurate every single day. People are picking a piece of software, they're taking the best parts of that software, the best features of that software, and then using something else to do things that are missing in that first piece of software. So it is that idea of providing that one place, that one sort of central hub, that one platform that they can use that replaces all of these different sort of mishmashed systems.
It sounds like you've got a long road ahead of you, but I love the approach. I do. I've run into these struggles too. So it's one of those pieces that you're transforming a traditional thing that's been there. I mean, with building products and building the process for the way that we provide the assets and really even managing just the steps and the flow and the workflow for it all. It's been around for decades, right? This is something that we as developers and creators have been doing forever, but creating a tool that supports it and is customizable and doesn't require me to go have 3 or 4 third-party connections and integrations to make it all work as one. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and one of the key pieces for that, and one of the ways that we're approaching it, is there are these tools, but there isn't anything that combines that client-facing collaboration, which is the big thing that's missing right now in the market, and the big thing that we continue to learn every day.
And that client-facing piece is going to be the biggest piece, because if you want like an ad agency or a digital transformation firm to come in and work for clients, having the buy-in is going to be critical there. So that's awesome. So as you've been doing this, I mean, you've actually been doing it for the last couple of iterations of your career now. You've actually been building this product. It sounded like you had some kind of deep initial learnings that you had out of this, but it sounded like it was really around let's build our own so that we're not customizing as much. What else can you tell me about some of that journey, though? Where were some of the stumbling blocks that you had as you went through even the last iteration or as you've been doing this new startup for the last few months?
Yeah, and I love the way that you had phrased that, Jeremy, because when I look back at it, it's something I didn't realize until now. But yeah, in some ways, we have been doing it for a long time because we were, developing these internal tools and trying to solve these problems that we were facing. We just weren't building a tool that could be used, by a broader market. It was all, sort of internally based. There's a couple of things that I think that we've learned along the way about how the product's changed and what our idea of what the product has evolved over time. When we first set out to build this product, our first sort of meeting, our CEO, Perry, who was the founder at my previous business, one of my co-founders now, that first meeting, he sat us down. He gave us each a copy of the Jobs to Be Done playbook by Sam Chlebowski. It's a great book for anybody involved with product. It basically takes jobs to be done theory and applies it to product development in a more specific way. And it was hugely influential to how we approached the problem and how we approached the validation. We had initially had this idea that the job to be done was to keep projects moving. As we got further along into our research process, what we found is that the job really wasn't to just keep projects moving. The job was actually to collaborate with clients, to get the things needed from that client so there wouldn't be delays and roadblocks in the project that were preventing that project from crossing the finish line. That was our first big realization with this process, is that the product itself needed to be something that was easy for clients to use. It needed to pay attention to what the client expects out of a process, but be flexible enough that it could be adapted to the way every individual marketing agency, design firm, consulting agency works.
So it sounds like as part of that process, then you were kind of reevaluating and going back to that same original statement, right? And going back to what jobs need to be done, doing the when and what to make sure that you're always revalidating what you were building and how you're building.
Exactly. And it's a true iterative process where we look back at things that we had changed and things that we thought were the wrong direction and end up being in some ways the right direction as we speak with more people. And there's other things that get thrown out entirely that we say, hey, this isn't really the way that this needs to work, or this isn't really central to the functionality of the product. But yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Keeping that iterative process as a core tenet really helped fuel the change that you were trying to implement then.
Absolutely. And these ideas and this methodology, it influences so many aspects of the product from the highest level down to the most minute thing. Like, for example, what does the client see when they get invited to a new project? What are the things that they can do within a dashboard that they are looking at? On the other side, for the person who they've hired to do the work, how does that person set up a new project? What are the things that they most need to be able to do so a client can give them those things that they need easily and quickly and in a way that isn't overwhelming for them?
And those small changes build up to major epic changes when it comes down to the workflow that you're building at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll go on to influence things like what features we need to add and what parts of the process of that client agency work do we need to be providing features for? What functionality do we need to add that's going to add 10x the benefit to somebody using this tool for the first time?
We're touching on some subjects that I always get a little excited on here, right? Because you're talking about transforming a lot of organizations in the way that they approach using these tools to engage with their clients and their customers. If we were going to boil it down to like a simple statement, though, can you try to define your process for innovation, transformation, and give people a little bit of a taste of what you and your team are really trying to bring when you're talking about innovation here in this space?
Yeah. So if I think about those terms, innovation, transformation, modernization, in some ways, I put them all under one umbrella. And this may be something that's a little bit more specific to startups, but the umbrella that I put all of those under is disruption. We want to change the current ways of working and provide tools that innovate, meaning those ways of working didn't exist previously. We want our tool to transform, meaning it's a new way to work that is better, whether it's more efficient, whether it's faster, whether it provides new ways to increase revenue for a business. And we also want to modernize, meaning we want to leverage new technologies in a way that applies these new technologies to a previous way of working. So we can provide then by effect a product that becomes the new way of working. It's similar to see what you see with tools like Slack, for example, where 10 years ago, if somebody asked you, hey, Slack it over to me, they would say, what are you talking about? And now I can say that phrase with almost anybody. And even if they don't use Slack or their organization doesn't use that as their messaging platform, they probably have a good idea of what I'm saying about, because Slack invented this new way of working and new way of communicating within an organization.
That is awesome, right? Because disruption is not necessarily destructive, but it's changing the way we think about things. And the way you break out innovation, transformation, and modernization, I love, because it comes down to that. Let's create something new, change what isn't working, and make sure we're doing things in the right way and the best in class in what we have today, and always looking to the future. I will just bow down to you right now and just applaud everything. I love it. Trying to build something in this way is always challenging because things change on us as well in the technical realm, right? I mean, we're technical creators. We love building new things on the newest shiny thing that comes out. Let's be honest, we wouldn't be tech heads if we weren't there. But some of the biggest challenges I've run into are we're halfway through building it on, let's say, Kubernetes when that was brand new, right? And I've got containerization. Everybody's behind me. But now we can just go and use purpose-built containers, things like app services, a lot easier on Azure, or let's go completely serverless and do Lambdas. And this has been some of the challenges we ran into early on. As you've been trying to get into this startup mentality and start building a brand new product, what are some of the challenges you've run into? Maybe not technology, maybe it's just on the product side, but I'm kind of curious, what are the biggest hurdles that you've hit?
One of the biggest challenges I think that we've faced is understanding whether the product should be customer first or product first. And the way that I break these down between product first and customer first is think about something like Apple. Apple launches their iPhone. When they launched that, they told people, hey, this is what you're going to be using. You're going to love this. It's going to be a product that transforms your life. On the flip side, a product that is customer first, you look at something like Salesforce, they are saying to their customers, hey, what functionality do you need? What do you want us to build? And we'll create it for you. And that's how Salesforce gets all of these additional features, these integrations. And finding that balance was, and it has been over time, pretty challenging to say, do we want this product to tell people what to do? Or do we want to listen to our customers and make sure it is fitting into their workflow and their existing process so we can get that organic adoption? It's a balance. I'd say where we are now is we are leaning much more heavily towards a sort of customer first product just because of all of this research we're doing, all of this validation we are doing, and we are really listening to our customers and not pretending, hey, we know what's going to be best. I think being product first can work for certain products, but we've just really gravitated towards this idea of a customer first product, but it's taken some time to get there.
And this is a typical challenge when you're starting new products. Do you want to define the space you're in or have the users define it for you? If that's your biggest stumbling place, I'll be honest with you, you're on good foundations because this is the start of every good product that we have out there. Whose voice are we listening to? Is it our idea or is it our customers' ideas? And figuring out which one is going to work best for the product that you're bringing to market is typically that hardest hurdle to find, and then eventually just drive through, right?
Another challenge that I will also touch on, because I think it's helpful for any first-time founders like myself or anyone else in the space who's building a product, is finding what you need to cut from the MVP is something also really challenging, because if you don't cut things, you're not going to be able to ship. But at the same time, you want that core functionality that's going to be really exciting to somebody, that's going to make them want to use it. And balancing that requires some really tough cuts, some things that you thought you could never imagine cutting from an MVP and that you'd have to launch with this. You sometimes have to throw away those features in order to ship it.
Getting an MVP out as fast as possible with the base level pieces that you need and making sure that your customers agree with you. Those are some of the hardest conversations. Getting something tangible built in a short time frame has been something that I've used as kind of a tagline for my life, honestly, because if we're not delivering fast, it's hard to do, right? If it takes me 3 years to get an MVP out, that means it's probably not going to be as good as if I can get something in 3 months or something, just because at least then I got somebody logging in, feeling it, and playing with it. So I feel you on that one. The hardest part there too is that table stakes, the base level functionality that you had in your mind when you started this. It changes over a couple of months of doing that research and talking with folks and seeing what actually resonates and what doesn't. How much of it did you end up having to kind of just push to the side as you started this journey?
It's a very interesting question. I would say we have kept the high level features that we knew we wanted for the MVP, but what we had to cut are some of the individual functionality that falls under that. So for example, things like our client dashboard. We had one sort of idea going into that, what somebody would be able to do and what a client would be able to do in that dashboard. And then we had to cut sort of smaller things within that, things like utilizing artificial intelligence to populate a project timeline. Things like auto updating certain parts of the progress tracker based on a delayed project. So at MVP launch, it might have to be just sort of manual, like here's the due date, here's the new project completion date. Things like that had to get cut in order to maintain that core functionality, to be able to ship a product that we know people are going to love and people will be really excited about, but just won't have some of the bells and whistles there.
But yes, it's still on the road, and that's the key, right? Even though you cut out of the initial MVP, you just put it into a future phase or a future release. So we'll get to see it eventually. If we're talking about where you see your group going, Motion.io, you're just starting up, you're starting to get the product built and go out. What do you see is going to be the biggest impact for you in like changes in marketplace or technology platforms that's going to help you guys be the most successful over the next, let's call it 5 years?
It's a very good question because we've been so in the trenches with building our first version that sometimes it's hard to even take a step back and look down the road. I would say within the next 5 years, what will probably be, most impactful, if I had to guess, is going to be, and it might sound a little crazy, artificial intelligence. The way that AI is sort of coming to fruition and being more, consumer friendly every single day, it gives you all of these new options, and it will give us all of these new options to do things with the product. Kind of alluded to that earlier, talking about, using AI and some systems to sort of auto update a progress tracker. But there's a ton of other things that we can do. For example, taking notes and taking feedback from a feedback task within Motion.io and spitting out sort of a summary of that. And there's all of these things that we're going to be able to do that might not be feasible just at this moment, but are going to quickly become available to us.
Is there a place I can upvote that option right now? Because doing that like executive summary version of a 3-hour meeting for product development and finding a way to bullet list that out, let's build the AI model for that right now. That would be a huge, huge time saver for us and our teams.
I love it. My co-founders, I will share that with them after this call. They'll be excited to hear that. It was something that we started being like, ooh, shiny bell and whistle, like we could do this in the product. And then it was like, no, we got to take a step back. That's going on the roadmap.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. If I could have solved that, I probably would have as well already. It's probably not quite there yet where it's easy to do, but you do a 3-hour workshop with somebody and you go through and you put together this master plan and you got 20 pages of notes. And then you spent the next 5 full days synthesizing that into bullet points to make it so that everybody understands it on the board level. Let me tell you, if there's a way to make it so that AI can do that a little bit easier, I am all for it.
Yeah, and our goal for something like that would be not only can you create bullet points out of that, but you can create tasks for the people who are executing on those specific bullet points, those specific actions that can have a closed, open, or in progress status. So you're not spending time in something like Asana or Trello or drafting things on a Miro board. It's spit out for you out of those meetings.
If we can take that to its eventual end too, you can even automate card creation in like Jira or Azure DevOps for the actual developers to execute on then, right? At the end of the day, it sounds like that's where you really want to go. I mean, automate as much as you can, get the intelligence built into the platform so that your users aren't worrying about the details that are written in the cards. They're talking about how to get that product to market faster.
Yeah, exactly. And, whatever that product may be is kind of where we're standing with what we're doing right now. Our initial vertical and kind of who we're focused on is web development agencies, marketing agencies, designers. But the long-term goal for the product is we want to expand and we want to grow bigger and have this be a tool that anybody who does client-facing work, or even if they're using it internally to collaborate with a team, it makes that process of collaboration not only easier, but it automates things in a way so you have more time for these productive conversations and you're not running around, sending follow-up emails or creating tasks manually that need to be assigned. So it's kind of where we stand with the overall ethos of the product.
The last firm you were with, you kind of went through this rapid growth process, right? And you talk about wearing multiple hats. I think that a lot of our listeners and people that view this understand that one. I think we all do it at one point or another in our careers. How did you handle the change when you started bringing in more SMEs and experts? How did you guys really handle doing that scale up and scale out? You go from founders into then having teams operate. How did that transition work for you? And how are you guys planning on doing it now, if you don't mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a true learning process at Brighter Vision, the firm that I was at for 5 years. And now we had our share of struggles along the way. Hiring is tough. Building out teams is tough. What we found over time, though, is you have to be very practical and you have to be very mindful of your culture as you build up these teams. Your culture can't just be something that you think exists. You need to formally write it down. You need to talk about what your values are. You need to talk about what the expectations are and have everybody be on board with the mission and share the mission of the company long term. Because if you don't, you're going to get people on teams and within the organization who aren't aligned with that overall vision, and the culture creates itself, sometimes in a negative way. So a big part of what we're doing at Motion.io is from day one being very, very intentional about the culture that we create. And it might even seem silly, but we have already created a culture doc for our organization. Our CEO, Perry, has put together this phenomenal doc that talks about what our values are. A big part of our values, especially as a startup, is making sure that people know that they can take risks. And as long as they are taking risks and they are doing things that align with the mission that we're working to, even if things don't work out, if somebody does a marketing initiative or they release a feature that just doesn't create any value, that doesn't matter. As long as they were doing that with the intentions that fall in line with the culture and the organization that we're building, that's good with us. So a lot of those lessons were from Brighter Vision we are taking into what we're doing at Motion.io as we scale up.
I love that. Being intentional, clearly communicating, and that last piece, I just have to say, some of the same values that I try to push with our teams, that bias for action, and that constantly make the change. Stay within the values, right? But go ahead and try it. And if you fail, that's okay. We've learned something that doesn't work. Let's adjust it, and let's find that right path forward. Love that approach. Since we've been talking about innovation, startups, transformations. Can you name a company or a couple of experiences out there that just surprised you on like major change agents or digital innovation changers that have frankly just surprised you one way or the other, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise? I always find it's a little insightful to learn a little bit about where you think some of the coolest changes or most negative changes are.
So this one might sound like it's coming out of left field. We've been talking about the startup space. We've been talking about technology, but one of the companies that have surprised me most in terms of digital innovation and transformation is actually the New York Times. So I think back to 15 years ago, the New York Times, they had their website with the newspaper. You could log in, you could read it, but it was, I think about 7 years ago or so, you saw this huge digital push from the New York Times. And today you look at them and they have their crossword app that people play on their phone all the time. They have all of their podcasts that people are listening to. The Daily is oftentimes the number one most listened to podcast in the United States. And I think about that and I'm like, somebody was really intentional about this change that they made and this push into digital. Because at the time when they really reinvented themselves, people were saying journalism is dead. All of these newspapers, these local syndicates are going out of business. And New York Times was basically like, hey, hold my beer. Watch us transform the journalism space and watch us stick around.
And you're not wrong on that one. I actually love the New York Times story because they went from being one of the most stodgy, traditional print publications to, like you said, nearly overnight transforming to this digital enterprise that just instantly swamped the marketplace with all of the different things that they can do and changing very quickly from that only print and web to going to every modality that they could use to reach out to their constituents and users. So it's been amazing watching them.
Yeah. And they're onto something too, because you see it, other people have followed them. Like look at the Wall Street Journal now. They've followed right behind them with that same strategy.
Yeah. Well, and it's everybody now, right? I mean, every single major organization is starting to take this ideal of digital transformation. That's why we love talking about digital 2.0 because, digital transformation, something we did 15 years ago. Let's talk about the next evolution. We're going to jump into a quick little segment called Hype, Real, or WTF. And it really is just nothing more than I'm going to do a kind of a rapid fire of a few different subjects to you. Get your thoughts on it. Tell me if it's real or hype, whatever you might want to think on it. Okay. We already hit the first one, AI.
Real, here to stay. Over the past year, it's been mind-blowing to see the consumerization of AI. Through the tools I use every day, Descript, an audio video editing tool, can do things as complex as auto-leveling studio tracks and giving them those like studio effects. I use another tool called Copy.ai, which I plug in a couple bullet points. It spits out a summary of a blog post. And then there's OpenAI with the folk there doing things like DALL-E, where you type in, a couple of words, it spits out an image. So absolutely real.
The metaverse.
Hype with a dash of real. So I think that VR, IR are here to stay, but I don't see Facebook's metaverse being the long-term environment that people adopt. Many of the people who are really interested in VR, AR are wary of Facebook in some ways. I think we'll see a metaverse type environment, but it's just not going to be Facebook's metaverse, or I guess now Meta's metaverse. It's going to be something much more organic.
Creating something more VR, AR based, but maybe not the metaverse. Makes sense. All right. One of the more controversial ones, crypto. And we'll talk cryptocurrencies for the most part here. But if you want to go into NFTs, et cetera, it's all an extension at this point.
So this one, I'll also say real with a dash of hype, just because I think that the use case for cryptocurrencies has been proven. And there are things that you can do with cryptocurrencies that traditional monetary systems don't have that type of functionality. So I think cryptocurrency is here to stay, but over time, it's going to get trimmed down to a couple of key cryptocurrencies that get that sort of widespread long-term adoption. I think Ethereum is probably the closest right now, just because Ethereum has so much more functionality over things like, a Bitcoin, for example. So yes, real dash of hype.
Fun one. Elon Musk.
I gotta say, WTF. It's a tough one for me. Elon's ability to take the things that he's passionate about, like making the world a better place whatever lens he sees that through is really powerful. You see it with Tesla. He said, hey, we need to move away from fossil fuels. I'm going to make an electric car that is so cool and so functional that everybody's going to want to drive it. I want to go to Mars. I want to go to other planets. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to invent rockets, and then I'm going to use those rockets to send up satellites so I can provide this consumer service internet that is cableless, that can be provided to anywhere all across the world, wherever they are. So there's a level of realness, but then at the same time, I'm just like, WTF, man, like stay out of the press a little bit. Like, are you buying Twitter? Are you not buying Twitter? What's going on? You're having babies with your account executives. It's a whole thing. So
there's a level of really cool that you've built out a lot of this stuff and just brought some of your dreams to fruition. But can we get away from like the reality show TV part of it?
Oh, yeah, that is a great synopsis there. Sometimes you just have to shake your head.
All right, last one for you, remote and hybrid work.
That one's real. Without any caveats, I think remote and hybrid work is going to be here for a long time. It's ultimately going to depend what your organization is and how you structure yourselves. If you have a remote hybrid policy, if you're fully decentralized, or if you are mandating everybody comes into the office. And I think it's going to come down to the organization, whether they adopt these sort of policies.
All right, Sam, that is everything we've got for the day. Before we let you go, give you a chance here, give a shout out, tell us a little bit more about how we can contact you, Motion.io, how they can get involved if they want to, anything you want to share.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Jeremy. It's been awesome chatting with you, and it's just so fun to talk with another person because as we've been in this process of development, Motion.io, it's really great to speak with somebody who has more experience in this area than myself, and hearing that, it sounds like we are taking some of the right step.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we're going to have to talk a lot more as time goes on and as the product gets out there, too, because I have a feeling my teams would love to use this.
So yeah, if anybody is interested in learning more about Motion.io and what we're doing, you can go to Motion.io/launch and sign up for our launch list. What we do there is we provide product updates. We give away free early access to people on that list. We just released our pre-MVP of Motion.io last week. And basically what that is, 2 of the primary features of Motion.io, where we're giving demos of that and asking people their thoughts and their suggestions. So also feel free to head to our website at Motion.io and fill out a contact form. We'd love to hear from you, understand how you work and what would be helpful in the product. Other than that, feel free to check us out on the socials. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. Type in Sam Chlebowski, kind of a hard last name, but I'm sure we can include it in the show notes or something.
I was going to say, we'll get a link down in the description part for you. Sam, I appreciate it, man. This has been an awesome conversation. I am hoping we can do this again as you get your MVP launched and see where you ended up, because I have a feeling there's going to be some really cool stuff coming from you and your team.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks, Jeremy. Would love to come back on the show and talk more about it when the time comes. So very cool.
Thank you again. And thank you again for everybody that's listening in. We'll talk again soon.